All right. Greetings, everyone. This is Eric Stewart from the Fishing Fanatics podcast, and today I'm joined with Patrik Zander, who's the CEO, co-founder, and inventor of Svivlo, which is a reel company based in Sweden. So, how you doing, Patrik?
I'm very good, Eric. Thank you very much for having me.
Absolutely. It's great to have you here. We met down at ICAST this year, and I got a chance to try out your reels down there, and I got to say, it's unlike anything I've ever experienced in fishing before, and we're going to dive into the whole story about your reels in a little bit, but let's start with you and your personal and professional background. Tell me a little bit about what it's like growing up in Sweden, what kind of fish you guys fish for. Even if back then, were you like a big fisherman, or did that kind of come in later in life? So tell me about how that kind of love for fishing kind of developed.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so I'm 54 years old. I grew up in the southern part of Sweden. We lived very close to the ocean, and I'm going to jump a little bit ahead, but I grew up watching my father standing at the beach and just throwing his rod and reel every evening. And I'll get back to why he did that. But um, I really wasn't an avid angler during the early age, and neither was my father. That hasn't come until the last few years, actually, when we started the business together. But in terms of fishing, pike is really popular in Sweden if you go with freshwater fishing. So northern pike, but bass, of course, as well is also popular. Zander, my last name is very popular as well. Um, and then you have, well, I would say those are the most popular fish that you try to catch.
Yeah, I remember seeing videos online about over there in Sweden about the northern pike you guys have, and it's pretty cool, like the size and what people can throw for them, and how aggressive they
Yeah,
are over there too.
yeah,
Feels like a
yeah,
whole different
they're
world.
yeah, and that's also why we started with a pike reel
Mm,
because it is very popular in Sweden.
absolutely, and we'll get into all your reels and all that
Yeah.
stuff in a little bit. Let's talk about your professional life. Um, when did you kind of become an entrepreneur, and what was that kind of mindset going into your reel company?
Yeah, I've been working in the software industry for the majority of my professional life. It wasn't until 2016 when I asked my father if we were to see if his invention was something that we could patent and then try to get it into a reel and start selling it. So, software industry, been working in a couple of international startups, a Dutch startup and a US startup. So, the entrepreneur in me didn't really come out until 2016, 2017.
Wow. And then, so that story about like your dad kind of developed something. Is that kind of the story about how you guys got started with the company that you're at now, the Civlo Reels?
Yep, yeah, that's correct. As I mentioned earlier, I grew up watching him standing on the beach,
Yeah.
throwing his rod and reel, and he wasn't a fisherman. He was a watchmaker, a problem solver, and I asked him a few years ago how he came up with the invention and why he started doing it. And he said, "Well, I just thought that there would be a better way to tackle the backlash problem on multiplier reels." So he invented the technology already back in the 80s. And as an inventor, you're likely not an entrepreneur. So it was put on a shelf. And then I asked him in 2015, 16, if we should see if this was something that we could go ahead with and start a business around.
So your dad actually got started with the idea back in the 80s making watches.
Yep. So
That's
yeah, so
kind of insane.
he was very good at fine mechanics, of course,
Yeah.
and motion and rotational motion and specifics as you have in a watch. So he was very good at those types of movements. And I remember that he had many different prototypes that he worked with, and everything was handmade. Back in the 80s, you didn't have
Yeah.
CNC machining, etc. So he did everything by hand on his manual lathe, and he was that was amazing to see. That was a real craftsmanship.
Absolutely. Well, Patrick, I'm sure all the listeners are like, sitting here kind of wondering what's different about your reels. Like, what makes them so cool, so unique? Especially, I've got to hold them and throw them and kind of see it. Can you try to articulate what makes your reels different? Because I know from personally feeling it, but I just want to hear it from your own words.
Yeah, I think that's also one of the challenges that we have. I mean, it looks like a bait caster, it is a bait caster, but it behaves completely different to anything else. So if you're familiar with the bait caster, you know that there are different things you have to do in order to cast and to not get backlash. You have to tension the spool knob a bit. You have to use your thumb at the end of the cast, and you have to adjust either a centrifugal brake or a magnetic brake, or on the latest reels, a digital brake. But a digital brake, a magnetic brake, or a centrifugal brake, they activate based on spool rotation. So the faster the spool rotates, the more they will break. And this is an issue because the longer you want to cast, the more they will break. So then you loosen the brake systems a little bit, and if something goes wrong, you get a hideous backlash. So our technology, it reacts to changes in motion and not spool rotation itself, so the spool speed. So what happens is, as long as the lure is pulling the line, nothing will happen. But as soon as the lure stops pulling the line, our brake system will activate, because then the spool will start to decelerate due to internal friction, etc. And it will break until the lure is pulling the line again. Then the brake system will release. So the only time you actually risk getting a backlash or overrun is when the lure stops pulling the line. During acceleration, there is no risk of getting backlash. So this is essentially the only way, to this point, that you can tackle the problem properly without losing distance, because that's also one of the, I would say, the most frequent comments, questions, and concerns is that, hey, yes, of course, every reel vendor say that they have reels that eliminate backlash. And yes, you can get any bait caster to not backlash, but then you get no distance.
Mm-hmm.
So that's also what they ask us. Do you get any distance? And I think you can confirm that as well, but you will not lose distance. You will probably be able to cast even longer with our reel than any other tune bait caster.
Yeah, let me try to put this in like my own words too, and I hope I don't butcher this, but like I have a couple Shimano DC reels and they're great reels, right? But the
Yep.
issue that arises, and I'm sure people that have one can kind of testify to this, is if you turn it up to the 4 setting and you have the brakes on high or you have them on 3 and you try to make that long cast, you cast it, you hear that little and it completely slows down your lure, and your lure kind of goes nowhere. The thing that was really cool about your reels is when I was casting it, it it almost could tell if you were casting it into the wind, if you were casting it with the wind, and the spool would actually speed up or slow down depending on where you were actually casting it. So it wouldn't bird's nest. And then also towards the end of the cast, when the spool's normally backlash, then it would slow down and then stop it and then drop it right into the water. So it would only really break towards the end of the cast when that spool's kind of like the fastest. And it was interesting to feel it because you could actually feel it slow down. And it's interesting because like you really never truly know until you have the reel in your hand.
Yeah, that's completely true, and that's also why I mean, we call the technology cast guard, but it is an automatic thumb.
Yeah.
So just when you're about to use your thumb, our technology kicks in and reduce spool speed. And also one of the big advantages that you have with our technology is that there is nothing to adjust. The spool tension, there is a spool tension knob, but it's just there to have no leeway on the spool axle, so there should be no tension on the spool axle. But that's it. I mean, you can change the weight of the lure. You can cast in headwind. You can cast tailwind. It doesn't matter. There is nothing to adjust. So what we can, I mean, I've heard multiple professional anglers and amateurs say that, hey, this reel is impossible to backlash. There are no reels that are impossible to backlash, but I would say that ours is very, very difficult. And if you're a beginner, or if you're in a tricky situation where you risk catching a branch when you cast, I would just tighten the spool tension up a little bit. Because as our technology reacts to spool deceleration, when you tension the spool tension a little bit, you will increase deceleration. Our technology will react quicker and break more aggressively. So it's a great way for a beginner to pick up our reel. You just tension the spool knob a little bit, and then they can learn how to cast.
Yeah, you hit my next question, literally the nail on the head. I was gonna bring up who this reel was made for, and I was just like thinking back to like all the people I fish with. Like I don't fish with any professional fishermen really. It's just me going out there with my dad or my buddies who never casted a bait caster before. And the worst feeling, it's cool to have them out on the boat, but the worst feeling is when they go, oh, like, Stu, I feel like I think I messed something up here, and I look down and my reel is just completely blown up, and I'm like, yeah, probably just gonna have to cut out that line and get a new line in there. And then next thing you know, 30 minutes later they do it again for another reel, and you're like, this is just a complete mess. And then you end up spending $50-$60 on new line to line up all your reels.
Yeah. But it's not a beginner reel per se, but it's a reel that anybody can enjoy. If you're a professional angler, I mean, you can focus more on fishing than adjusting a reel and just being constantly on the edge of getting backlash, because you want to achieve those few more feet or yards. We've had anglers saying that, hey, I can cast as long as I can do with my tune reel, but I don't have to put as much effort into it.
That's very true.
If you compete and you fish all day long, that can save you a lot of hassle, I would say.
Oh, absolutely.
So anyone that wants to have the lure longer time in the water, I would say those are the target anglers for us.
That's a great point there. And then let's talk about your reels as a whole, because I see you have about 4 on your website right now. You mentioned that you have a pike reel and a couple bass reels too. Tell me a little bit about your product development right now.
Yeah, so the first reel that will hit the market in September, it's Genesis 1, and that's the pike reel. It's a 300 size bait caster. On the website there are 3. It's the same reel, but there are 3 versions of it, and we did that due to demand. Some wanted to have a reel, a limited edition reel. They wanted to have a reel with a serial number and a certificate of authenticity. So that's something that you can pre-order today. There's also a VIP reel that you can pre-order, you prepay it, and then you will be first in line when we ship them. And then there's one bass reel called Draken 1. So that's what we have. And the Genesis 1, it comes in 2 versions. It's a 6:3 gear ratio, and then an 8:1, and left and right hand, of course. And the Draken 1 comes in 7:3 gear ratio.
Gotcha. So the VIP one is for people to order that on the Genesis 1, and then they're kind of first in line there.
Yep.
And then the collector's edition, you get a certificate of authenticity and then a serial number 2 for your reel.
Yep. And it's limited to 50 reels. The 50 first reels that comes out of the production line will get a serial.
That's awesome. And then I heard...
We will also come out with a VIP reel for Draken if you want to be first in line.
Gotcha. And then being a startup company, testing out different R&D and everything, how was your process through like research and everything? Because I know the idea kind of came up with your dad in 2016. Now we're sitting here in 2023 kind of getting these out, getting these pre-orders ready. What was that whole process like, just the R&D of it all?
Business owners and marketing professionals in the Philly area, Bad Rhino takes the overwhelm out of digital marketing. With tailored digital marketing services, from social media management to SEO and PPC advertising, our expert team navigates the complexities of the digital ad space for your business. Let Bad Rhino lead you to success. Visit badrhinoinc.com and let's take your business to new heights. Bad Rhino, we do digital marketing so you don't have to.
Yeah, it's been challenging. A lot of failures. Because it is a very difficult problem to solve. We started really with the development in 2018. And as a startup company, the most difficult thing is to have money to support the company. So we searched for investors. We had a difficult time doing that. We got one initial investor that wanted to do this. But as money ran out, we searched for additional ones, had a very difficult time finding investors that believed in our technology and our business model. So we looked at other alternatives for our technology because it can sit on anything. It can be implemented in anything that rotates. And at that time, when we searched for investors, my father, who was 78 at the time, he fell using his rollator. And it's a four-wheeled walker. And then we thought to ourselves, hey, our technology reacts to changes in speed. So it should be able to also stop rollator when it accelerates away from the user. So we built a very simple prototype. It worked really well, and found an investor that wanted us to focus on that. So in end of 2019, we decided to focus on the rollator wheel. We spent 2.5 years on that, and now that product is out on the market. So we put Svivlo on hold during that time, and in April last year we restarted development on cast guard specifically, and now it's ready, and it's ready to be shipped in a few weeks.
Gotcha. And that other company is called RoloGuard, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Awesome. So anyone that wants to go check that out.
Yeah, so it's the same technology, essentially. And we learned a lot about our technology. We learned a lot about manufacturing. We learned a lot about risk-taking and all of that you need to be in control of in order to manufacture a product.
Awesome. Cool. And then, Patrik, another thing we like to hit on this podcast is just social media too, because I see you got a lot of videos from iCast of different people using your reel and kind of explaining what they're feeling and seeing it actually work in action. So tell me a little bit about your strategy on social media and how you're kind of getting the product out there and kind of getting that story out there and getting real life reactions too out there.
Yep. So social media is, of course, extremely important. And what we've seen is that it seems like we attract the younger generation with our reels more than the older generation, more than my generation. Because my generation, they are so used to using a baitcaster. They know how to handle it. They rarely get backlash, even if they do. They don't want to admit it, but they do get backlash. But I think the younger generation, they just want to fish. They couldn't bother less with trying to learn how to use a baitcaster for weeks, months, or years even. There was one video that was not recorded by us, but another one on TikTok. I think it has gotten 5.2 million views already.
Nice.
And that's amazing. So social media is very important. So we have TikTok account, Instagram account, Facebook account, YouTube, of course, and a Twitter account. We're not very active on Twitter, but TikTok and Instagram are the two most important social media for us.
Awesome. Cool. Awesome, Patrik. Well, let's wrap it up here. I'm going to give you the floor here to shout out any of your social media handles, your website too, and then also let people know when they can expect the reels once they pre-order it. I know you said September. I don't know if that's for all your reels or just a couple of them, but go ahead.
Yep. So you will find us on svivlo.com. That's the website. So svivlo.com. And all social media are at Svivlo. So if you just search for Svivlo, you will find us. The reels will be, so the Genesis one will start ship in September. And Draken one is planned to start ship in October, probably end of October.
Cool. Very cool. Well, like I said, awesome reel. For anyone listening, definitely check out the social media, see how it works with people actually using it and feeling it. It's an awesome reel. I can't wait for you guys to send out the products and get people kind of testing it out and trying it out. But Patrik, I appreciate you jumping on this podcast with me, explaining a little bit more about your story and about your company.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Absolutely.